Today we're diving into a topic that often flies under the radar but can have a huge impact on your performance, which is thyroid health. Now, this is definitely not my area of expertise, so I've invited thyroid specialist dietitian Alisha Knicely on to help us understand the connection between thyroid function and triathlon performance. So whether that is something that you are dealing with, a thyroid condition personally, or you're just curious about how it affects your body and your health, then this episode is going to provide some really valuable insights. In today's episode, we'll discuss why thyroid health is important, how to actually check your thyroid function and your thyroid health, and as always, some practical steps to optimize your thyroid function. So tune in to learn about how to keep your thyroid in check so you can train harder, recover faster, and perform at your best. Welcome to the Triathlon Nutrition Academy podcast, the secret weapon in your ears for triathletes who want to get fitter, faster, stronger, and healthier with evidence-based nutrition. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Alisha. I'm so excited to talk to you and pick your brain on an area of expertise that is definitely not my own, but you're the expert, so we're going to hear some great insights from you today. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Taryn. I'm excited to be here.
Can you kick us off by just introducing yourself a little bit and explaining how you became a thyroid-specific dietitian?
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard many stories similar to mine where it's a personal history, a personal story of my own diagnosis with autoimmune thyroid disease that happened back in 2017. So I've been practicing as a dietitian for 10 years now. Just getting into my career, I was actually a dietitian at a wellness center at the time. I had just moved out of the clinical atmosphere, and I decided to go in for a routine physical and did some more in-depth lab work to check on my own health. And I had the thought that everything was going to come back great. And I was the picture of health, and I exercised and ate well and everything. And to my surprise, my doctor's surprise, I had extremely elevated thyroid antibodies. My TSH was well above range in the 40s, rock bottom T4, rock bottom T3. My doctor truly made the comment. She was like, I don't know how you're like getting out of bed in the morning, how you're functioning. And I was just like, I don't know. This is just how it's been. I didn't really, I guess, realize the signs and the symptoms and normalized a lot of it. And it had been going on for a while, and my body got, like our bodies do, got very good at adapting and compensating. So that was a huge turning point for me, what I understood health to be and what to look out for, and also my career. So I continued working at the wellness center, and I saw a lot of thyroid patients and now had a personal attachment to it that I wanted to learn as much as I could to help my own body, and then also the patients I was seeing more than what we were already doing. And through that, I also got to experience the patient side of being referred to an endocrinologist and not getting any help on lifestyle, none. And that was extremely frustrating because as a dietitian, I very much understood the importance of nutrition, and you can manage chronic diseases through lifestyle, but I wasn't being told that by my providers. So that went down the pathway of additional training, certifications, training in functional medicine, where we look more at root cause approach, preventative versus symptom management. And over the years, I was able to reverse my symptoms, reduce my antibodies, get myself into a place of remission, and really just understand how to live with Hashimoto's, but also like thrive with Hashimoto's. Like truly feel like I don't have the condition most days. And it was such a passionate journey for me. And I saw so many women and men go through the same, run around with their doctors and not getting help and being told their labs are normal and having all of the symptoms and having nowhere to turn. So I just turned that into, this is what I want to do. I want to educate. I want to support and advocate for this group, this population of people, because I've been there and I can empathize. And yeah, it's just something I love doing. And that's kind of how I got to specialize with thyroid patients. So personal journey, and then just really learning everything I could. And now only taking on and working with thyroid patients.
Lucky you were a dietitian and you knew how to find the right information and do the research to like firstly help yourself and then be able to share that knowledge with others, because it is really frustrating. There's not a lot of information out there, and I've had the same experience with regular doctors as well. They just are like fob you off as like, you got little people and it's normal to be that tired and whatever, and you're like, no, 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 no. Like there's definitely something going on here. I hate it.
Yeah, it's not right. You take their word for medical advice or recommendations, and then you're stuck. And it's hard to see.
Yeah, I think we're both aligned with like the prevention rather than the cure space. And there's so many things you can do before there's a problem to stop there being a problem in the first place. So for people that have no idea what the thyroid does and what its function is in the body, can you explain a little bit about that and how it does impact our metabolism and our energy levels? And I can help apply that then to the triathlete population.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thyroid gland is a gland. So it's part of the endocrine system, and that means it secretes hormones. So hormones are these chemical messengers. They, dictate a lot of processes in the body. And specifically with the thyroid, it is located in your neck. It's nicknamed the butterfly gland because of its shape. It's not very big at all. I think it's about an ounce, but it's very important and very powerful and necessary. If you have your thyroid removed for whatever reason, you do need to be on thyroid hormones. You cannot live without them. So thyroid hormones do a lot of huge involvement with the metabolism, your metabolic rate, which runs so many different processes in the body, and also how we, basically obtain energy from our food and how well we do that, as well as utilizing fuel, having healthy weight management. But it goes so far beyond that, which is why when you have a dysfunctional thyroid or low thyroid hormones are high, you experience symptoms systemically, like head to toe. Thyroid hormones are involved in the brain, which is why anxiety and depression and apathy are a symptom. And thyroid issues used to be screened with things like, do you have depression? Let's check your thyroid. That's not the case as much anymore. Same with cholesterol metabolism. You have high cholesterol. Well, it used to be, again, a screening criteria for checking on the thyroid, and it's not anymore. And a lot of reasons for that, but it's involved in sex hormones, fertility, so reproductive health, your ability to build muscle, your bone health, GI motility, how you generate heat, which is part of metabolism as well. So it really is, hair, skin, nails, your appearance can change from, low thyroid hormones, your ability to heal and recover, which is really important for athletes. I'm sure we'll talk about that too. So yeah, it's involved in every area. And to highlight that point, every cell in the human body has thyroid hormone cell receptors, meaning every cell, for one reason or another, does require some level of thyroid hormones to function at an optimal level.
That's a lot, isn't it? And easy to see why it being out of whack, everything can go awry. Can you explain quickly the difference between hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, and then Hashimoto's?
Yeah, so that's a common question, especially because Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism sometimes are used interchangeably, and sometimes even when the doctor is communicating to the patient, they might lump those terms together, but they really are separate conditions that do often go together. So hypothyroidism means low thyroid is a clinical term for like clinically low thyroid hormones in the body. The opposite being hyperthyroidism is high or elevated thyroid hormones in the body. Now, the question in functional medicine is the why. Well, why do you have low thyroid hormones, or why do you have elevated thyroid hormones? Most of the time for both states, it's autoimmunity. So with Hashimoto's, this is an autoimmune condition where the immune system becomes imbalanced and it creates autoantibodies towards your thyroid tissue. And I'm sure we'll talk about markers and lab tests that identify that. This is an autoimmune condition and it damages the thyroid gland to the point where it underproduces thyroid hormones. So thus it leads to hypothyroidism over time. It can take years to get to that point, or it could be a lot faster depending on the severity of the disease and the inflammatory process. And then with hyperthyroidism, most often the root cause is Graves' disease, which is autoimmune hyperthyroidism, where the immune system is targeting different parts of the thyroid that cause more release of hormones, and it becomes super high, and that can be dangerous too if not managed. So that's the difference. One is just describing the state or the level of hormones, and then the other is describing the autoimmune condition. And you can have hypothyroidism without Hashimoto's, although it is Hashimoto's is the most common cause for hypothyroidism, and it's much more common than Graves' disease. And you can have Hashimoto's without hypothyroidism. Like you can have the autoimmune condition without it impacting your thyroid hormone levels. And this is where it takes a skilled practitioner to look at your values and explain what's going on, and then also what to do about it, depending on what stage you're in or where you're at.
And it's more common in females compared to males, is that correct?
Yes, much more, 5 to 8 times more.
Wow. We always get the rough end of the stick.
Yeah, and that's true for almost all autoimmune conditions. And from my understanding, they believe it has to do with our different hormonal profile, which can also influence our immune systems, which is directly linked to autoimmunity. So there's different theories and reasons as to why, but we are different than men. So that's going to leave us more vulnerable to certain things.
And so what are some of the symptoms that you might experience if your thyroid isn't functioning correctly?
Yeah, so we can start with low thyroid hormone, since that is definitely more common. If you're hypothyroid, the symptoms you're going to want to be aware of would be exhaustion and fatigue, because these thyroid hormones are responsible, again, for metabolic rate and cellular energy production. So that's probably top. And fatigue not restored from sleep or rest. This is like continued chronic fatigue. Weight gain and weight loss resistance, again, going back to how hypothyroidism impacts the metabolism. Then we have GI issues like constipation is very common. Heartburn and bloating can be pretty common. We have hair thinning, hair loss, weak nails, brittle nails, dry skin. Things like anxiety and depression and mood changes might come up. You might notice changes with your hormones. So that could look like changes with your menstrual cycle. It could look like a loss of your period as well. That's, a huge indicator of women's health is the health of your menstrual cycle. It could look like high cholesterol, or cold extremities is a big one. So cold hands and feet and nose. So again, poor circulation, not able to generate body heat very well. It could be poor recovery. It could be the inability to build muscle. That one was one that I felt like I experienced. Even things like osteopenia and osteoporosis, because they're involved in building strong bones too. Those are kind of the top ones, I would say. And then for hyper, we're kind of looking at basically the opposite of a lot of those things. So this could look like feeling really hot, having a higher metabolic rate. So it's actually, they might be thinner or unable to gain weight in a healthy way. They could feel anxious. They could deal with insomnia, heart palpitations. Thyroid hormones are involved in like heart rate as well. So these are, and also with GI health, it can be, instead of constipation, like loose stools, like rapid, movement through the GI system. So those are some of the more common symptoms you'll see with excessive thyroid hormone levels.
A lot of those things are probably what triathletes feel like on the daily basis. And some of it might even be confused with iron deficiency. So one of the things we'll dive into later is how to actually check for it and what we're looking for in our blood, so that you are not sitting there freaking out that you've got hypothyroidism right now, because a lot of that stuff can go hand in hand with being quite active, doing a lot of training, having a full night of sleep and still feeling tired when you wake up, as well as, the bowel type things. Either direction it could go. We'll jump into that a little bit later so that you can calm down and just be at peace, knowing that you're looking for the right things and getting the right answer when you go to the doctor. Before we dive into that though, like I did a deep dive on this as well myself, what are some of the key nutrients that we need for our thyroid to function optimally and make sure that we're not deficient in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, the thyroid does require micronutrients, these building blocks to create hormones. The one I think most people are aware of is iodine. So if you look at a lab test and you see like T4, T3, that's actually describing the number of iodine molecules attached to make that hormone. So iodine is important. The thing to know is it's this Goldilocks kind of nutrient, because you don't want too little and you don't want too much, especially in the case of Hashimoto's, because it can actually exacerbate autoimmune activity. So we do need some. The thyroid doesn't need too much. I think it's like 52 micrograms. I know it's recommended like 150, for general health, and then more if you're breastfeeding or pregnant. But that is definitely necessary for the thyroid. But if you have Hashimoto's, sometimes we recommend restricting or going on a low iodine diet for autoimmune management. But iodine's one, and in developed countries, it's not so much of an issue like it is elsewhere in third world countries where they're actually iodine deficient and they develop goiters and things like that. And hence why we did iodized salt to prevent that. But now with our diets have plenty of iodine, and then it's added to the salt too and in processed foods. So not so much of a concern. Then we have other nutrients like selenium and zinc are really helpful for thyroid hormone conversion. Our thyroid produces mostly inactive thyroid hormone, and in our peripheral tissues, we do convert that to the active usable thyroid hormone. So certain nutrients are required for that. There's also certain amino acids like tyrosine that are used as the building blocks for thyroid hormones. But if you're getting adequate protein, you're going to get enough of that amino acid where you don't need to supplement for anything like that. Really, it's looking at your overall dietary intake of protein. There's vitamin A is another great one. And then we can kind of get into like there's nutrients too specifically that can be helpful for Hashimoto's and immune modulation and inflammation management. But those are some of the top ones that I think a lot of people may have heard about or you might see in a thyroid complex support supplement or something like that.
And is that something that you'd recommend people take, is just a general thyroid support supplement?
It depends. When I work with my clients, I really take a look at their nutrition and then their lab work and see if they need more, maybe a therapeutic consistent dose through supplementation. The fact is that our nutrition habits may not be great, but on top of that, our food quality and soils are depleted. Our food's more depleted than it used to be. So it does help to fill the gaps, but I do it on a more case-by-case basis. Supplements have a time and place, but not for everyone, for sure. Certain things can deplete, your ability to absorb or acquire nutrients, whether it's GI issues or stress. So I take all of that into an account. Otherwise, you could be wasting money on a supplement that you don't need. If you could just focus on certain foods in your diet, you'd be all right.
Yeah, good answer. I like it. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yes.
And so what are some of your favorite foods then to help hit those big target nutrients?
Yeah, so this may not be popular, but I'm just going to speak the truth. So organ meats and seafood are great sources of all of the things I just listed. So you get those minerals like copper, zinc, selenium, protein, of course. You're going to get iodine in seafood and sea vegetables. Again, being cautious with that if you have Hashimoto's. Nuts and seeds are going to be sources of too, like zinc and magnesium. Brazil nuts are a very rich source of selenium. And then I'm a huge fan of animal-based protein because it is very bioavailable. It's very nutrient dense. It's very easy for the body to get those nutrients. Not that you can't be plant-based, you can. You just have to usually be a little bit more on top of your nutrition, making sure you're getting the right combinations and enough of the food and you can digest that all very well. I'm a huge fan of antioxidant-rich foods, berries and your dark leafy greens and omega-3s as well. And that can be very therapeutic too, since most cases of hypothyroidism are Hashimoto's, not always, but it's a great thing to include in your diet.
Yeah, nice. I love that they're all whole foods and they're all real foods too. So from a training perspective, what are some signs and symptoms that a triathlete is maybe overdoing it with training if their thyroid's not working properly, or some of the warning signs that they may need to adjust their training a little bit or do something differently to help their overall health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like most athletes kind of know, or they should, if they have the awareness there, they should know what their body feels like when they're performing and recovering well. Like they're hitting new PRs, their times are better, they're lifting heavier, whatever it might look like for them. But when that starts to all feel like it's becoming compromised, so some classic signs of overtraining could be like insomnia, changes with your appetite, excessively sore muscles. You just can't perform at a level that you maybe used to be if you want to compare that to like your baseline or like your peak level of performance. That is a big indicator that, okay, something is up, whether it's stress on the body, inflammation, hormones are off, and it's definitely worth investigating.
I think a lot of triathletes have no idea. We just keep training because it's on our program and we do as we're told because we like Training Peaks to go green, or we like to, have the session achieved. So some of those things are good to look out for because your body will tell you what's wrong if you can tune in and listen to it.
Oh, and I don't want to forget this one because it's probably the top of the list, but weight loss resistance or continuing to gain weight despite maybe not changing anything. So that's a sign too that stress hormones may be up, which can also impair thyroid hormones. Inflammation might be up. You might feel puffier, more achy or swollen. Those are some key signs to look out for.
Yeah, thank you. So if somebody's listening and they think, oh man, maybe my thyroid's not working properly, what are the tests that we need to ask our doctor for to make sure we can assess that more accurately?
So typically your doctor at the very least will order TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. And this is going to assess general thyroid hormone output. It is actually a hormone produced by the pituitary gland in your brain. So it's not really a thyroid hormone. It's a hormone used to communicate to your thyroid gland from the brain. When that becomes elevated, it's an inverse relationship. That's a sign of hypo or low thyroid hormones. When it becomes suppressed or low, that's a sign of hyper or excessive thyroid hormones. So at the very least, you're going to get that. Some doctors may also test what's called free T4. This is the inactive thyroid hormone, and especially if you are on thyroid hormone replacement, like Synthroid, levothyroxine, Euthyrox, whatever it might be, typically they check that as well. But for the most part, that's where a lot of conventional medicine will stop. I recommend more of a full panel to get a better picture of your thyroid function. So if you want to test for Hashimoto's, we're looking at thyroid peroxidase antibodies or TPO antibodies, or the second one is thyroglobulin antibodies. Those are the ones that you're going to want to check to diagnose Hashimoto's. Graves is different. It's TRAB antibodies and TSI. And I'll have to remember what those, I don't actively work with Graves clients, but there's separate antibodies that you can request to screen for Graves' disease if that's a concern. And then I also like to look at T3 levels. A lot of conventional doctors don't look at that, but it's helpful to see if those levels are optimal and if you're converting well from inactive to active, because it's very common, at least with my clients, I see that a lot is poor conversion. So like their TSH looks great, their T4 looks normal, but they're very symptomatic. They're not converting, so their cells aren't even getting the active thyroid hormone. So on paper, good, but the patient just feels awful. So that's worth looking into. And then with my clients, I also test what's called reverse T3, which oftentimes if you're not converting inactive T4 to active T3, your body's converting it into reverse T3, which binds to the same cell receptor site as free T3, but it's not usable by the cell. So it kind of blocks it. And that's actually a protective mechanism by the body and the thyroid. So I like to view this as the thyroid's a very sensitive gland, and it is going to perceive with the brain, obviously, but it's going to perceive in the environment the stressors, and can you handle, have you surpassed that threshold of your personal stressors or stress load? If you have chronic, overtraining, chronic undereating, and whatever else life is throwing at you and you may have going on physiologically, your body's going to downshift to protect for survival if it doesn't have what it needs and if it doesn't feel safe or nourished or whatever that might be. So that's where I see reverse T3 go up. It can also be for other reasons, illness, surgery, whatever, but that's really important to see beyond the TSH and free T4 because it can provide answers and at least a place to look and target, where to put your efforts essentially, and also help you not feel like you're going crazy because you do have some validity that can actually be shown in blood work.
Modern medicine. So if somebody does have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, what do we do about it? What are the big rocks to help support our thyroid function so that we can not feel so rubbish all the time?
I mean, they're all individual, so that's the tricky part. But the ones that I think almost everyone can work on optimizing that I talk to with all of my clients on social media is we want to work on your nutrition. There's almost always areas for improvement of the quality of your diet, your meal timing, how well you're balancing your blood sugar levels, because we're eating every day, multiple times a day. So it's a really good opportunity to work on improving. So nutrition is good. And with that, I really like working on gut health. So that's a big one too, because it is very much connected to how well you're absorbing the nutrients from your diet, but also immune balance and regulation. I have a lot of, and this is kind of a two-way street, like thyroid function and autoimmunity impact gut health and vice versa. So we kind of have to put the flame out somewhere. And that's a really good place to start. It's gut health and nutrition. And that can help calm inflammation and absorb micronutrients from your diet better. Metabolic health would look like blood sugar balance, again, nutrition, but also the type of movement. I love the phrase, the dose makes the poison. That's true for almost anything, whether it's your diet, your exercise, your recovery. So I keep that in mind for all of my clients of, their personal stress buckets. And then, how can we modify, mitigate things to help you feel better and help your body recover better. So movement, it's a great therapeutic tool, but when it's underdone or overdone, it goes into that bucket of a negative stressor versus a positive stressor. So that's when I work with my clients on a lot, is making sure that works for them and for their bodies. And a lot of times it's temporary too. It's not like you're going to, scale back on exercising forever. Sometimes it's just in the short term to give your body a chance and a break and work on some other areas. And then another very big one would be stress management. So especially in the case of autoimmunity, you ask anyone who has an autoimmune condition and they're going to tell you stress is like probably at the top of their trigger, because, the nervous system is going to dictate if you're in a healing state or a fight or flight state. So learning how to address your stressors, identify them, coping mechanisms, whatever it might be, because the stress never stops coming, right? I mean, there's so many things that really do impact thyroid health, and I mean, we could go on and on, but like you can also make the argument of like how well you're detoxifying every day. Yes, we have a liver, yes, we have kidneys, but that becomes overburdened because we live in a toxic world. I don't care where you live or who you are. The fact is we are exposed to so many things that our bodies weren't really intended to, and that can build up. And then you throw in thyroid hormones and sluggish thyroid, and things start to slow down, and you see liver impairments, and the liver is a big site for thyroid hormone conversion. So then again, it's this two-way street, as is a lot of things in the body. And I always tell my clients, like, let's take inventory of your life. What are your top 3 biggest areas that in your gut and like, be honest, that you could improve upon? Are you not getting outside, or is your diet not great? How is your emotional mental health? That type of thing. And when we start there, I mean, we really do see a lot of great progress and allowing the body to get into a better place of healing.
Yeah. So you mentioned detoxing. What are some of the key products in our lives that we need to maybe switch to a different option? Because I see that a lot with thyroid nutrition is layering in the switching to low tox sort of products. What are some of the big ticket things that we need to look for and ingredients that we want to avoid if thyroid health is something we want to improve?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like your air and your water quality is huge because you're breathing air all the time, you're drinking water all the time. So we filter our air. We have air filtration systems. We have like water filtration on our drinking water and on our home as well. Because you are going to get things like chlorine and fluoride and things like that that can disrupt thyroid hormone production. Specifically, fluoride is a big one because it's in the same family and it can block iodine uptake into the thyroid. And some people are more sensitive to that. So those are 2 big ones. And then, yeah, when it comes to especially women, if you are wearing makeup every day or perfume and things like that, it's really a great idea to look at how many products you're using and how many ingredients we're being exposed to. There's so many things, and they can also disrupt, estrogen. You hear the term like endocrine disruptors or xenoestrogens. Like they can mess with your fertility health and your estrogen balance. So, like looking at your deodorant, I mean, as natural as you can get. There's some great companies out there now, which is great, whether it's your toothpaste, your deodorant, the makeup you're putting on your face, or the lotion you're using, or the sunscreen, especially talking about like athletes outside a lot. Like if you're using that constantly, I try to look at the things that what am I using on a regular basis and what's absorbing into my body, like what's going on my skin. And those are the products I tend to be a lot pickier about and with. I tell my clients too, like it can be a gradual swap out. It doesn't have to be all at once because that can get expensive and be very overwhelming. And also just the less products you can use overall. Like there's certain things I used to use that I never use now, like perfumes and fragrances and hairspray. Like I don't really need any of that, maybe once in a great while, but it's not really necessary and also saves you some money too.
Heaps of money. There's so much stuff that you can buy that gets marketed to females, right?
Yes, exactly.
So on the female path for the female athletes that are listening, I know that postpartum thyroiditis is a thing and can impact the first 12 months postpartum. Do you know how common that is or how many people you see in that space? And then what are some tips for somebody that might be navigating that?
Great question. I don't know the stats, like the updated stats on how common it is. I think one of my clients has it right now, and we're trying to figure out, because what happens is after giving birth, there's a huge, almost immediate hormonal shift with the hormonal profile from being pregnant to no longer being pregnant. And that, again, with the connection with the immune system, is a huge toll on the body. And anyone who's had a baby can testify to the extreme night and day change that is. So it can cause this transient inflammation of the thyroid gland that can last anywhere from 6 months to potentially 18 months, but 12 months is about the average. And it will show up on lab work like Hashimoto. So sometimes it's hard to differentiate other than the timeline, like it happened postpartum. But postpartum is also a pretty common time for women to also develop Hashimoto's. So with postpartum thyroiditis, it does usually resolve on its own. Medication isn't usually warranted or your levels can be monitored, but you can kind of go back and forth from this hyper to this hypo, and it doesn't help the craziness that postpartum is, but there are these kind of big fluctuations, but it does tend to even out. Now, women who have positive thyroid antibodies prior to going into pregnancy and postpartum are more likely to develop postpartum thyroiditis. So they're at a higher risk. So women who have a history of thyroid disease, like get screened, but before you even try to conceive too, if you can. But having that knowledge, since thyroid disease and autoimmunity is definitely, there's genetic components to it. If you have that knowledge in advance, then you can at least prepare yourself and have your labs maybe monitored more often, especially during pregnancy, which is a very important time to monitor thyroid levels because the fetus is dependent on the mother's thyroid hormones up through the middle of the second trimester. So it's really crucial for the development of the baby. But things to kind of mitigate, that time period if someone is dealing with postpartum thyroiditis. Again, we're kind of looking at ways to help with inflammation. Thyroiditis is inflammation of the thyroid gland, and for some people, it does help for them to experiment with their nutrition and see what foods might be triggering more inflammation, whether that's gluten, processed foods, excessive sugar, excessive caffeine or alcohol, nutrient void foods, like they're not getting enough micronutrients or antioxidants or polyphenols or enough protein. That type of thing can be really helpful. And then as much as possible, the stress piece is still going to be huge. As much as you can with a newborn, trying to allow yourself to rest and recover. And I think it can be very helpful to record your symptoms and record a timeline so you have more data to bring to your doctor as they are checking on your labs. They may want to do, depending on the case, an ultrasound of your thyroid gland to make sure that, if there's swelling or something else, that they can just keep an eye on it. But yeah, that's what I would recommend.
There's so much to unpack there, isn't there? And, for a new mum or even the second or third time mum, like trying to keep stress levels down through that 12-month postpartum window, then maybe wanting to return to training and trying to juggle all the balls, it can be a lot. So little shout out to any mums out there just to look after you first because you're the bus driver, right? And if you go down, the whole shabam goes down.
Exactly. Yeah, it's tough. I work with many moms and I'm a mom too. And it's like, there's aspects that you do need to be selfish, but not in a selfish way. It's where you do have to make sure you care for yourself. Care for yourself like you would one of your family members, and a lot of times we don't do that, or we do that very last. And we wonder why we're not thriving or we're not able to heal. It's like you gotta give your body what it needs and not feel guilty about it, which is probably the hardest part, at least for me, is like not feeling guilty for wanting to rest or do whatever self-care thing needs to happen.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm sure a lot of people listening are the same. So in terms of like ongoing management and long-term with thyroid things, you hear about, remission. You said it right in the beginning. Is it possible to heal from Hashimoto's and not have it anymore? Or do you mean just not having any markers in your biochem that are out of whack and you feel good on a daily basis?
There's no permanent cure, at least that I'm aware of, for autoimmune conditions. There are a variety of therapies, whether you look at, not so much for Hashimoto's, but whether it's like medications like immunosuppressants, steroids, those options typically offered in conventional medicine for autoimmunity. More of the holistic functional approach really is about remission as far as essentially keeping your immune system happy and balanced, your lab work stable and even. And when you have erratic lab work, like your TSH is bouncing all over, you're constantly having medication management, that's usually a sign of inflammation to the thyroid gland or an autoimmune flare. So that's important to kind of understand that. It's learning how to care for your body while living with Hashimoto's, and to no fault of your own, because life is going to happen, but there can be periods where maybe you do reach a remission, your antibodies are low, your lab work's stable, your symptoms are resolved. You've worked and addressed those root issues to help your body come back to a place of balance, because this imbalance does not happen overnight. It's years of dysfunction. It's years of environmental stressors. It's years, whether you realize it or not, you're living out of alignment with your body is the way that I like to think of it. So once we get to that good place and you've established those habits, there's going to be times where, an illness, a trauma, something may happen that may cause a flare or trigger the immune system. And it doesn't mean that you failed. I mean, your body is kind of just responding to that event or that circumstance. And I try to tell my clients that, we know what to do. We can help the body. Maybe we don't know what the cause was, or maybe we do, but the goal is just understanding how to care for your unique needs in your body with your set of circumstances, because everyone is different. I mean, when I work with my clients, they really just have Hashimoto's. They usually have hormonal imbalances and gut issues and this and that and the other thing. So it's the full picture. It's not just one thing, but I feel like the closer you get to remission and you've worked on these different areas, the easier it does get, because you transform. You learn how to become that person to sustain those healthy habits, and it becomes your new normal, which is the goal, and life is going to be life, and there's different seasons. And especially for women, we go through these significant hormonal periods too, with like puberty and pregnancies and postpartum and perimenopause and postmenopause. So it's like, we have to set our expectations accordingly that things are going to change, and at least being aware of that and accepting of it can help too, so it doesn't catch you off guard like, oh, things were perfect and I just, you don't reach remission and then stop doing all of the things that helped you get there. It's a continuation.
Ongoing.
Yes.
Is it possible to ever come off medication? In your experience, has that ever happened for anybody?
Yeah, so it is possible, depending on if you're able to identify what caused the dysfunction in the first place, combined with how much of your thyroid gland can function. Sometimes for people, in my case specifically, when I was diagnosed, my thyroid, it had likely been going on for quite a while without really my knowledge of it. So I kind of explained to people that maybe your thyroid's working at 80%. It may never get back to 100, maybe it will. But in that case, like, hormone replacement therapy is recommended, because we don't want to be in a suboptimal place long term. We don't want to chronically be in a hypothyroid state, because that is damaging too. So I know there's cases of and research to support that excessive iodine, and once their nutrition was mitigated, they were able to get their Hashimoto's in remission, and maybe they didn't even need thyroid hormones in the first place, but they were placed on it inappropriately, right? That can happen too, where the thyroid hormones are prescribed very quickly and very easily.
Yep.
Like one of the most common prescribed prescription, drugs. So that too is sometimes, and I've had many clients like over the years who they didn't need to go on medication. We had room to work on lifestyle things first. Their lab work didn't warrant it, but they were placed on it because they had symptoms. So their doctor said, okay, I'll put you on this thyroid medication, but they never needed it in the first place. So yes, it's not as common. I will say a lot of people who do go on medication, if it's needed, it is a lifelong thing. But if that's the thing that helps you stay optimal in combination with everything else, then, it's a small price to pay, I guess you could say. But I'm hopeful for what the future has. There's so many cool things coming out with like peptide therapy and stuff for autoimmune, patients that I think is really promising. So I guess we'll just see what happens there. But that's probably the number one question people ask. They're like, can I get off my thyroid medication? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe. Like,
no one wants to take meds.
Right. And I also try to explain, like, it's not a prescription drug. We are replacing hormones your body can't produce. And those hormones are very necessary. And if you're on the right dose, I'm kind of in the camp of the least effective dose is where you want to be if it's needed.
And then how often are you checking that? So if you're getting bloods done regularly, how often should you check in on your thyroid function?
The most often you can, if you start thyroid medication or if you change a dose, is every anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. The average is 6 to 8 weeks. Or pregnancy or postpartum, you're going to want to be checking it probably that often for a little bit, especially if you are symptomatic. If you're in a stable place and you're feeling good, 1 to 2 times a year. But I am more of, if you are maybe starting off in not a great place and you're making changes and you want to assess progress, then do it every 2 to 3 months, because I do like data points. I like to see what changes are helping, reach a certain outcome with your lab work and how you feel. So it is case by case, but I do mine about twice a year.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. That was just a random question. I know some people are probably thinking, well, thank you so much. It's been so insightful into all things thyroid, where I know a lot of triathletes that do struggle with it and they just have no idea how to manage it. And it's hard to find the right advice in modern medicine. Going to the doctor doesn't always help because they just hand you out a script. But maybe what's one piece of advice for a triathlete that does have some thyroid issues going on that you could give to help them through this?
That's hard because I know athletes, I feel like there's a certain mindset, maybe a competitive one and wanting to be, very high performing. And the thing about the thyroid gland and autoimmunity is it's kind of, think of it as, this is your ultra sensitive barometer for stress. And stress looks like many different things. Again, nutrition, recovery, all the things that we've been talking about. So working on making yourself a more resilient person is the way I like to view it, because the more resilient you are, the more stress you can handle. And learning how to mitigate the various stressors in your life, things you can control specifically. There's certain things you can't control, so don't focus on those so much. Focus on the things that you do have control over, like your sleep schedule, your recovery schedule, your nutrition, those types of things. And give yourself a lot of grace. It's not your fault if something goes wrong. Sometimes that's just going to happen, but you can remain a high functioning athlete as long as you take all of that into consideration and truly learn your body and, have the awareness of what your body is telling you, learning the symptoms to look out for, staying on top of lab work, dialing all of that in, because as an athlete, you do have to have things dialed in if you want to perform at a certain level. I think that's just a requirement. But just understanding, what is happening with your body, being on the right type of medication for you, can make a huge difference too. There's different types, despite what your doctor may say. There's a variety of different types that you can explore too. So in that case, I say if you can work with a functional medicine doctor or someone, if you're seeking maybe diving deeper and optimizing things, that could help too. If you're not getting the support you want through your endocrinologist or your primary doctor, there are options out there to help you, achieve your goals for whatever that is.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good advice. So if somebody does want to dive deeper and wants to work with you and to support their thyroid, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, find me on Instagram. That's the best way. I have all of my resources, free and paid, and courses, and working with me, everything's housed there. So that's at Alisha, Lisha_thyroid_RD. Send me a message, give me a follow, and hoping to open up more services outside of the US as things become easier to do, whether that's testing and things like that. So hopefully I can offer that to people who are listening in Australia or otherwise.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's been very eye-opening, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed it as much as I have.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was great. I really enjoyed it.